السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. سفن لا تفرغ بضائعها ولا تحمل بضائع، تعطيل وخسائر ل10 أكبر سفن شحن في العالم، وفنادق تقاطع المنتوجات والبضائع الإسرائيلية دعما للقضية الفلسطينية وتضامنا مع غزة. حكاية مقاطعة ونجاح بين أمريكا والهند من الداخل. معكم زينب صفار، تابعونا. بين الهند وأمريكا حكاية إنسانية مشتركة وألم واحد، حكاية بين طياتها يقبع الألم والتضحية والشهادة والفراق. هي فلسطين التي لطالما كانت بوصلة ليس لبعض العرب والمسلمين فحسب، بل كانت منارة للكثيرين حول العالم، حيث انشغلوا وشغلوا كل من لا يعلم بهذه القضية العادلة. عزيمة هؤلاء النشاطاء لا تحدها كلمات، إصرارهم على المناصرة والدعم وتحطيم كل العقبات والحصار اللاشرعي الإسرائيلي لا يتوقف. فبينما يسعى المدافعون عن إسرائيل إلى حرف الأنظار عن مسرح جرائمها الرهيب، تبقى الآثار الناتجة عن هذا العدوان الوحشي خير دليل على تلك الفظاعات. في 31 من أيار مايو عام 2010 قتلت قوات الكوماندوس الإسرائيلية على الأقل 9 نشطاء عزل كانوا يحاولون نقل المساعدات الإنسانية إلى غزة، وبحسب الخبراء الشرعيين وشهود عيان قتلوا من مسافة قريبة. أما لائحة أسماء من تعرض لضرب مبرح وإعاقات جسدية على يد جنود إسرائيليين فطويلة بطول أيام قهر الاحتلال الإسرائيلي، ولا سيما الجندي في البحرية الأمريكية كين أوكيف الذي هشمت القوات الإسرائيلية وجهه، والطالبة الأمريكية أميلي هنتشوفيتس التي حرقت القوات الإسرائيلية عينها عندما أطلق جندي إسرائيلي قنبلة مسيلة للدموع على وجهها. تريستان أندرسون كان يصور إحدى التظاهرات عندما أطلق جندي إسرائيلي النار عليه وهشم جزءا من دماغه. الآن تريستان مقعد. كل هذه الأحداث موثقة بصور موجودة على الإنترنت. أحد مؤسسي حركتي غزة حرة وفلسطين حرة ومؤسس حركة التضامن الدولية الامريكي لارودي، الذي تعرض أيضا للضرب والسجن والتعنيف من الإسرائيليين وهو في 64 من عمره، لم يثنه ذلك عن العطاء والتضامن والصمود من أجل فلسطين. وكذلك رئيس منتدى الهند فلسطين فيروز ميتيبوروالا يحدثان عن أنشطة وتظاهرات غير مسبوقة دعما لغزة وفلسطين المحتلة في أمريكا والهند. Lارودي, one of the founders of the Free Gaza and Free Palestine movements and an organizer in the International Solidarity Movement from the United States of America. Welcome to the Inside, sir.
Thank you.
You're most welcome, sir. And Mr. Fairouz Metiborwala, chair of the India-Palestine Solidarity Forum from India, also welcome to the Inside.
Thanks.
Well, today this is the first kind of edition that we have two guests together, but it's, the issue is to talk about the stories of boycott and success between India and the US. Now, send the ship back to sea until Palestine is free. In another sign of answering the call of the boycott and divestment and sanctions movement last August, particularly on August 16th and 17th, there was a call from the Block the Boat Coalition to picket the port of Oakland and prevent Israeli cargo ships, ZIM, to be unloaded and loaded. This was a great challenge to the Israelis coming from ordinary citizens. How did you come up with the idea? How much did you deem it to be successful, and how did you pursue with the action?
I cannot claim to have come up with the idea, but the groups, and Block the Boat is the name of one of the groups. They came up with this idea, and there were some independent groups that actually came up with it first. But these groups were responding to the Israeli attack on Gaza. And they wanted to do something And so the idea spontaneously came up, and they consulted with each other. And first there was an idea to do it early in August, and then finally the 16th and 17th. On the 16th and 17th, the ship was actually anchored far away. It wasn't in the port. And they did this deliberately. The Zim company kept it out of the port because it knew that this demonstration was going to happen. So on the 16th and the 17th, there was a huge demonstration, more than 2,000, maybe 3,000 people who demonstrated, but there was no ship to unload or load.
Or load, yeah.
On the 17th, the ship came in.
Zim.
The Zim ship came in. And the call was to stay and block the workers from going to the ship. And the workers basically were
How did they interact
okay with this. And they actually needed us to take this action in order to be their excuse for not going to work, you see. They needed to be able to justify, according to their conditions of work, why they cannot enter, because there are protesters there and it's not a condition that they're comfortable with.
So is it the issue that they didn't want to go to work, or the issue that they believed in what you've been doing?
Well, some of both. But the point is that according to their contracts or to their conditions of work, they are not allowed to say, I'm not coming because I want to block Israeli ships. This is not permitted. And they agreed to this under their conditions. So they use us. They need us to be there to block the way. And then they can say, this is why we're not going to work, because our way to work is being blocked.
Now, Los Angeles and other cities followed the Oakland example, and the Block the Boat Coalition kept moving forward with this initiative. Allow me here to move on to Mr. Feirouz. In India, did you, did this resonate in India? Did you find way to also block certain kind of Israeli ships from loading or unloading?
No, we haven't reached that stage of the movement. But I think what was important in India was this particular attack on Gaza showed the conscience of the nation. For the first time, the corporate media across all the major languages started carrying humanitarian news reports from Gaza and actually targeting Israel for the kind of approach that they had on Gaza. And it actually happened after a major social media campaign in the country, where the Facebook, Twitter, and all, the entire, it was controlled by youngsters from all across the country. And
the social media was very focal in the
because immediately a photograph from Gaza, immediately a photograph from Gaza would come to someone's Facebook and it would go viral across the country.
Right.
It was that fast. So the social media forced the corporate media to take a position. And the second thing that happened was that we had demonstrations practically across every town and city.
Unprecedented demonstrations.
This had not happened in the last 25 years. Bombay and Delhi set it off.
What made these demonstrations unprecedented that much?
See, one was there was no central coordinating body. Across the major cities, yes, we were talking to each other that we need to coordinate and move ahead. So Bombay and Delhi set off. We went directly to the Israeli embassy, and it's not easy because they are heavily guarded. But even the governments and the police understood that this time they cannot stop us, that they will have to let the emotions play out and let the people go there. So when we would go there, we would be allowed an hour or two, and then we would be arrested and left after another couple of hours, but we would be back the next week. So for every week in Bombay, we were demonstrating outside the Israeli embassy. And it has erupted practically across every town and city across the country. It has been unbelievable.
Right.
And this led to a major call for the boycott of Pepsi, Coke, McDonald's, Starbucks, and that campaign is now still moving ahead.
Right, and in the wake actually of the unrelenting killing of Palestinian civilians by Israel, the Indian Hoteliers Association in Mumbai, they decided to boycott the Israeli products and beverages. How did the hoteliers, how did they react, how did they interact, how did they stick to such kind of action?
Yes, actually they did this earlier at the time of the Afghan and the Iraq wars. So there were precedents that were successful way back in 2003 as well. And this time it was, there were meetings which I was part of that called me for the larger politics of the situation. And the call from Bombay then spread across the country. So you would have photographs pasted on Facebook and Twitter where the fridges were empty. There was no Coke and Pepsi. Okay, and now what is more important is a new alternate drink has been introduced, yet those Coke and Pepsi bottles are not back. So the boycott still continues.
Is it still continuing?
Yes, it continues.
Is it a landslide boycott
yes.
across Mumbai only, or
No,
across
the
India?
country. Across the country.
Across the country.
Because once it's once it picks up in Bombay, it does spread to the country, because Bombay has people from across the country.
What about the companies that hire Indians who work for them, like Pepsi and Cola?
No, they've been trying to approach the Indian hoteliers, as it did again way back in Iraq. That time, after the Iraq war was done with, people went back to Coke and Pepsi. But this time, it has really shaken up the conscience of people. It has hurt everyone's heart, especially the daily bombings, the killing of children, the targeted killing of children, rather.
Yes, allow me here to ask Mr. Paul, why did the Gaza assault in 2014 move the people that far in the West and across Asia and everywhere?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with social media and the transmission of photographs and interviews and reports from the people themselves. You know, a fairly simple a smartphone is a very powerful device, and people have them everywhere, including Gaza. So this, I think, was a way to reach the American public, and there were precedents also. I mean, the same ship was boycotted was stopped in 2010 after the attack on the Mavi Marmara. But in this case, it went a little bit too farther, because when the first 2 days of blocking this ship, then the organizers declared victory and said, let's go home. But some of us, between 100 and 200 people, said, no, let's not go home. And they stayed there at the port day and night for another 3 days or more, and stopped that ship from being loaded or unloaded until that ship left. So that the outcome was not merely a delay in unloading or loading the cargo. And then the same coalition, this time without Block the Boat, but they're now calling themselves the Stop Zim Coalition, they did the same thing again in November.
Yes. Allow
yes,
me here,
sure.
Dr. Paul, the following month...
I mean, in September, sorry.
In September, yes, exactly. A group calling itself the Stop Zim Action Committee succeeded in completely blocking the Zim Shanghai from unloading or loading any cargo at all in the port of Oakland, and then Zim Haifa, then Zim Savannah, also in Seattle and Tacoma, Washington and Tampa, and Florida. How long do you think you can go on with this?
Well,
how much effort do you need to keep on going?
In the U.S., it's a difficult
Sure,
effort.
Exactly.
Yeah. And Oakland was the most suitable for this kind of thing. And so, honestly, I think it's not sustainable without the participation of other ports around the world. So, and the United States needs some encouragement, if you will, from other parts of the world doing the same thing.
I mean, just to have the steps being launched from the U.S., it's a difficult place to launch it and to think of any success. But the officials claim that there were no delays in certain ports and certain cities. What was the key to the success of this initiative, Dr. Paul, in one place more than in the other?
This is primarily the role of the workers themselves. In Oakland and on the West Coast, we have a special situation with the laborers right now because they have no contract. And since they have a dispute with the employers. So our case, there may have been workers who care nothing about Palestine, but it was a way for them to use this situation to show the employers that, well, you really ought to give us a contract, and then maybe this kind of thing wouldn't happen. So they had their own motives for doing this. But at the same time...
But does this work through with other ports?
It doesn't necessarily. For example, in Tampa, actually, there was, in fact, no delay. The workers went through. They didn't care about the picket line. And in some of the other ports in Los Angeles, there was a delay, but they didn't actually send the ship away. And the same thing in Seattle. So there were mixed results, and certainly it was very uplifting and encouraging to see the attempt to replicate what happened in Oakland in other places. But as I say, if we wanted to go farther, it's got to go to other countries.
Right. We're going to stop now for a short break, and then when we come back, we'll talk further about this initiative or the initiatives of boycott, divestment, and sanctions between the U.S. and إنديا. إذا فاصل قصير ونعود، لا تذهبوا بعيدا. نتيجة تدهور الوضع الصحي والإنساني في غزة، انطلقت مبادرة تدعى نبض الحياة بدعوة من الحملة العالمية للعودة إلى فلسطين بهدف جلب الأطباء والجراحين من حول العالم للسفر إلى غزة عبر معبر رفح لمعالجة الأوضاع الطارئة والجرحى، حيث يعاني بعضهم الفشل الكلوي والسرطانات وغيرها. الناشطان لارودي من أمريكا وفيروز ميتيبوروالا من الهند جرى استدعاؤهما للمساعدة في استخدام الأطباء من بلادهما وغيرها للمشاركة في هذه المبادرة، غير أن المبادرة تلك لم تبصر النور. لماذا؟ ومن الذي حال دون وصول العون الطبي والأطباء المتطوعين إلى غزة؟
Actually, our organization was able to recruit 23 medical personnel, 23 candidates, and they were very disappointed. And eventually it was just because and some of these people, I referred them to other ways to get into Gaza. But the fact is that most of them could not use these ways to get into Gaza, because
what ways here?
Through the Israeli Zionist
crossings.
Yes. But someone from Lebanon cannot do that. Someone from Pakistan cannot do that because they have no relations with the Zionist state. So they couldn't be used. If they can go through Rafah, then they can do some good in Gaza, and yet it was completely blocked, and we never had a decent explanation as to why not.
Yes, Fairouz, you were also called for this to take part in the cause of life.
There were at least 3 doctors' associations that came ahead. They said we want to be part of it, and the majority of them were non-Muslims. They were basically from the Hindu community. That was what was really moving this time in during the entire war on Gaza. We were hoping that the Egyptian government would agree, because we cannot fathom the reason about the closing of the Rafah border. It's a disaster in the making. It's a humanitarian disaster, and our appeal to the government of Egypt is, for God's sake, open the Rafah border. We understand your other problems of terrorism, but we believe that the army can contain that issue. You all need to give safe passage to the Palestinians of Gaza to go from there to Cairo for treatment or for their basic needs. That can easily be organized. So terrorism...
It was restricted both ways, and not to have foreigners coming into Gaza, or the people, the wounded in Gaza, to come into Cairo for treatment.
It's a very simple...
Why do you think this was taking place at this particular moment in time, when there was a catastrophe and a disaster in the humanitarian issue?
That is the perplexing question, and we are getting very different answers from our Egyptian friends. And it's difficult to read the situation. The Egyptian friends seem to be as confused.
Yes.
But at the same time, we are making a very simple request to the Egyptian authorities that open the Rafah border for humanitarian aid, doctors, medics to go in, and at the same time for the Palestinian civilians, children, women to come out for treatment.
What was the answer?
Terrorism is supposedly the big answer they're giving us. And that's what we're saying, it doesn't make sense. They can contain terrorism, but at the same time, this can easily be organized.
Fairouz, you described what was taking place by the Israelis against the people in Gaza is a mass genocide. What was the official Indian stance in this regard?
There were three responses. The first response was that the current government in, it's a right-wing Hindutva government. So there was a lot of pressure to have a debate in the parliament. And they were not allowing the debate to take place. They said Palestine and Israel both are friends. We don't want to condemn either side. Okay? That actually led to a public debate within the media. That look at what's happening in Gaza. And why isn't the government allowing, which actually went in our favor. Finally, there was a debate in parliament, and the Modi government was dilly-dallying and trying to play to both sides. Okay? Hamas fired the first rocket, Israel is defending, you know, that kind of...
Yes.
But after that, what happens is very interesting. At the vote at the United Nations Human Rights Council, India votes against Israel. Okay, so everybody was surprised that you, in Parliament, you're saying this, and at the United Nations Human Rights Council, you vote against Israel. And secondly, what happens at the BRICS meeting in Brazil, where India has signed on to the BRICS declaration, where there are two important paragraphs that support Palestine and that oppose Israel. And both those paragraphs are very explicit in the way they describe Israel as an apartheid state. Okay, so what we are saying that in India, the Indian foreign policy,
there is a change of mood.
No, the Indian foreign policy is deeply rooted. Even a right-wing government that we know has its own ideological affinity to Israel cannot veer far towards the right. And at the same time, the region is changing. The world is changing. A multipolar world is emerging. And India will have to calculate its presence in the region, not according to what the Americans or the Israelis want them to, but according to our own national interests. And simple logic dictates that India's national interest lies with the region and with the emerging powers in the region.
Right. How far do you agree, Paul?
That the world is becoming multipolar is no question, because the power of the United States is diminishing, which is the only remaining superpower.
Now, you said that they have their own motives, the workers, to cooperate with you and not to perform any kind of work over there. But did you educate them? Did you make them aware about the noble cause that you are after there?
The first thing to note is that Local 10 of the ILWU, the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, has a history of social consciousness that's very strong. They were the first union to refuse for 11 days to unload a South African ship in 1984. It was a historic event, and they're very proud of it. And furthermore, and some of those original workers, some of them 87 years old now, were on the picket line with us. So it's a very special local union that we have in Oakland. On the other hand, they were not necessarily very familiar with the Palestinian situation. And so we went to their union hall, the hiring hall, and we handed out literature, and we had as much contact as we could.
You're trying to educate them more on the Palestinian issue. Now, if this Fairouz was very successful in the U.S., would it find the light, see the light in India?
Right.
Are you working on it? Have you started?
No, we after discussing this idea with Paul, in fact, there was a meeting of some Indian trade unionists and French trade unionists, and they had called me for it on Palestine. Because the international trade union movement had a meeting in Algeria where they passed a declaration supporting Palestine. So they had called me for that meeting to take out this process with the workers' movement in the country. So we are working on that front. But on this specific issue of Zim, in this meeting tonight with Paul, we will get onto the details and then take this battle back to India, undoubtedly.
Yes. Now, Israel has banned Norwegian doctor and human rights activist Mads Gilbert from entering Gaza for life. Israel has also, we know that the history shows that the record that it has also banned Human Rights Watch investigators from entering Gaza back in 2006, and also Amnesty International has been refused access since 2012. Dr. Mads Gilbert is the latest esteemed persona non grata to be added to this growing list. What does that indicate?
It only proves that Israel is the greatest democracy in the Middle East.
Ironic.
But it also shows how arrogant Israel is getting now. They believe that they can get away with more murder.
Yes.
I was watching Netanyahu's last speech in the United Nations, and he actually made the most absurd statement ever, that Israel does not occupy anything. This is how crazy and arrogant they're getting with the kind of, the situation in the region actually.
Right, and Dr. Paul, how did you read this ban?
I think
of a medical figure.
Yes.
Before being an activist, he's a medical man.
Well, Israel weighs the pros and cons of these things. I mean, they have an objective here. The objective is to make everything Palestinian disappear from the earth. And if they have some obstacles that prevent this from happening, they have to decide whether the cost of removing the obstacle justifies doing so. In this case, they decided that this man, Mads Gilbert, he's too much trouble. He goes around the world lecturing and condemning Israel and all this sort of thing. He's very bad for us. If we remove him, we'll be condemned, but he's helping to condemn us. So which one should we do? They don't care about the morality of this at all. They have an objective to accomplish, regardless of the morality.
The same way they treated you.
Exactly, yeah. There are so many, myself included, and many others, that human rights advocates that have been banned from Israel. That should tell you something.
Right. Paul Lárodi, one of the founders of the Free Gaza and Free Palestine movements and an organizer in the International Solidarity Movement from the United States of America. Many thanks indeed for joining us. And also Feirouz Metiborwala, chair of the India-Palestine Solidarity Forum from India. Also many thanks. It was a great pleasure to have you both on our edition tonight.
Likewise, Zainab.
You're most welcome. إذا لقاء جديد في الأسبوع المقبل مع ضيف جديد وقضية جديدة ودائما من الداخل. للمزيد من التواصل بريدنا theinside@almayadeen.net وصفحتنا على الفيسبوك من الداخل، من كل فريق عمل من الداخل من كل الميادين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.